You're in an amazing series called Holy Habits. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite things to talk about. Even if I wasn't a preacher or a pastor, I talk to everybody I can about this topic. It is near and dear to my heart. And I believe today that as you've been unpacking these habits, these things that can be a part of your life, and everything can change. But I need you to understand today, everything can change only if you change some things. Okay, just offended 5 people already. Okay, don't say, like things can change if you change some things. And so today I want to take your attention to the book of Matthew chapter 8. And I want to read to you a few verses here. Matthew chapter 8, verse 23. Reads like this. Then he got into the boat and his disciples followed him, and suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was resting. Jesus was sleeping. Jesus took a nap. And the disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." And he replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. And the men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and waves obey him." I think that's a valid question for the disciples, but I believe there was a secondary question that probably ran through their mind, and maybe it ran through some of ours. How in the world could he sleep through this? And so today, as we step into week 4 of Holy Habits, I want to talk to you about a habit that I believe is vital to us living into the design and the blueprint of God, a habit that I think can change everything. Today, I want to preach from this thought: recovering rest. Recovering rest. Lord, I pray that they not hear my voice or see my face, but only hear and see the voice and face of you that lives in me. I decrease as you increase. Have your way. In Jesus' name, amen. Recovering rest. All right, so we've already established that we're first cousins. So I just want to have a confessional moment. Can I confess something to y'all? This is safe space, right? Okay, so I have a confession to make, and I do want to say this. This is what I'm about to share with you. It's a reflection of my past, not my present. I've come a long way. Who I was is not who I am, all right? Here's my truth. For quite some time in my life, until probably recently, a couple years ago, I judged people who took naps. I'm just talking about me. I'm not talking about you. I judged people who took naps. I didn't understand it. It didn't make sense to me. In my mind, naps were for children, not adults. Like in my mind, naps were the things that you did until you arrived at a certain grade level and an anticipated maturity level to be able to give your attention to things through the entirety of a day. You don't take naps when you grow up. I'm talking to people and they're like, "I'm taking a nap." I'm like, "Man, what are you doing? You're grown. You got to grind. Be productive. 24/7, all of that stuff." I mean, we are at a stage where we have responsibilities. People are counting on us. We got stuff to do, gifts, callings, objectives, initiatives. You ain't got time for no nap. And then it happened. I saw it. I was convicted. The scales fell from my eyes. I was reading the Bible one day, and it was right in front of my face. Are you ready for it? God in flesh, the lily in the valley, bright and morning star, son of David, great I am, chief cornerstone, Mary's baby, the miracle worker himself, Jesus, took a nap. Jesus, the one who performed miracles, Jesus, raised people from the dead, took a nap right there in the text. I'm looking at this and I'm like, what in the world could Jesus want us to learn from him taking a nap? And here's what I've come to find: that we have been conditioned to believe in our culture that the prerequisite to excellence is exhaustion. That the only way to live a life of excellence is to live an exhausted life. We live in a world that tells us that we are normal because we run from thing to thing and do and do and do and go and go and go. And that's just what everybody does. So it must mean this is the way God intends for you to live. Did you know that 43% of people ages 13 to 16 report losing sleep when they're stressed. 30% of American adults struggle with insomnia as stress-related concerns. And for many of us, this has been the enemy's greatest weapon against us walking in the way of God: worry. Worry has been his greatest weapon against us. And so we forfeit rest for wrestling because we really don't trust who's on the storm with us. We forfeit the rest of God for wrestling in our emotions and wrestling professionally and wrestling with ideas and wrestling with people. And we got all of this wrestling going on in our life. And we forfeit rest because we trust God, but just not enough to handle the storm that we're in. We find ourselves refusing rest. And here's what I've come to find. When we refuse to rest, we give more attention to our conflict than our creator, more attention to our situation than our solution. When we refuse to rest, we find ourselves in storms, hear me, that don't always require our strategy. Sometimes they just require your sleep. When you trust God enough, you say, I've done all I can do. I've fought all I can fight. I've said all I can say. Now I rest in knowing that the God of heaven and my friend can handle what my hands cannot. Rest is what God desires. And I believe today that many of us have forfeited this part of the habit of God because we don't know it's important to how we grow in our strength. You know, I remember working out. There's a guy in our church who played in the NFL for over 10 years. And I decided one day, like, man, I want to build some community with you. I want to have a relationship with you. Let's work out together. And it was the best, worst decision of my life. Best, worst decision. And after about an hour of that workout, he said, cool, man, now we can go work out. I said, excuse me? He said, oh, that's what we call a dynamic warm-up. I said, well, I've closed my rings. That's what I call done. Hit my goal for today. I'm done. But in that conversation with him, I said, hey, man, like, workout was your lifestyle. Now, what is the most important part of working out and building muscle? He said, oh, it's real simple. He said the most important part of muscle building is muscle recovery. He said every athlete will tell you that equally as important as what you lift is how you rest. Because it's in rest that your muscle actually grows stronger. He said, Vernon, every athlete will tell you that we don't forfeit our rest because we know how vital it is to our performance. And I'm here to let somebody know today who's only been taught how to fight, who's only been taught how to struggle, who's only been taught to show strength, who's only been taught how to keep going, that it is important if you're going to live into the habit of holiness that God designed, you must recover rest. And some of us have been so accustomed to showing up as Superman and Superwoman that nobody's ever told us we could take the cape off and be Clark Kent. You need rest. With this in mind, that we find Jesus on the boat with his disciples, and there's a unique situation happening. There's a storm, and it is a legitimate situation. There's legitimate fear. And here are the disciples, and they're going through this moment, and they recognize Jesus is sleeping, and they're making up in their mind, okay, the storm is real. What are we going to do? And they're trying to make up in their mind, are we going to wake Jesus up? Everybody got one person in life you don't want to wake up. You may be sitting next to him. That's another story for another day. You're like, I don't want to go wake him up. You go wake him up. I ain't going to wake him up. You wake him up. And they come to the conclusion that this situation is not going to resolve itself. We need to go wake up Jesus. So they go wake up Jesus. And Jesus gets up. And I love the contrast of Jesus' response to their reality. Look at what Jesus says. He says, if you had more faith, you wouldn't have had to wake me up to deal with this. He said the gap between how we're responding to this situation is actually not a weather issue, it's a faith issue. And the reason why many of us have struggled in some of the stormy seasons of our lives is because we just haven't gotten enough faith to not only trust the power of God, but to trust the power he placed in you. That some of the power you're looking for is not found in a divine miracle, but is found in a divine discipline. It's a habit that's going to save your life. Do you have enough faith? And here's what I've come to find. Most Christians trust God with provision, but we don't trust God with pace. We got enough faith to trust God to do it. We just don't have enough faith to wait for him to do it. Come on, I know y'all real safe. Come on, Pastor Josh not here today. Come on, let's just talk. We family. Pastor Josh ain't going to hear about this, okay? Can we all admit, some of us love God and trust him. We just don't like how slow he moves. Like I done done the 21 days of prayer and fasting. You ain't done nothing yet. I know you can do it. We just something more than able. You just ain't done it yet. And we trust God with provision, but do you also trust God's pace? And it's in pace and waiting on God that many of us start working beyond God. It's in waiting for God that many of us try to outwork God. It's in waiting for God that many of us get impatient and take on new responsibilities and opportunities that might have been outside of the timing or will of God. It is in our wait that we often outwork God's design of rest. Got a question for you. For all my Sunday school people, here it is. What is the longest commandment that God gives? People who are what's the longest commandment? I'll help you. Remember the Sabbath. Keep it holy. Go back and look at it. God uses the most words on the fourth commandment. Watch this. Do you know which one is the most broken? Remember the Sabbath. Keep it holy. God uses the most words to tell us to rest, and it is the one we break the most. Now watch this. Look at this in the scripture. If we're going to live out a holy habit, we have to know, what does God consider holy? So let's go to Exodus chapter 6, verse 23. Exodus chapter 6, verse 23. Look at what it says. He told them, this is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake, boil what you want to boil, set aside everything left over to be kept until morning. So they did exactly that. They set aside until morning as Moses commanded. Didn't stink or have maggots in it. Eat it today. Moses said, because today is the Sabbath of the Lord. Today, though, you won't find any in the field. For 6 days you will gather it, but on the seventh day, Sabbath, there will be none. Look at what God says. God says, the way I am building your rhythms, the way I am designing your life, the way to honor me with a holy habit is for 6 days, I want you to go after it. For 6 days, I want you to be productive. For 6 days, I want you to have great work ethic. For 6 days, I want you to do everything that I've placed in your life to do. But on the seventh day, you won't find my blessing in the field. He said, I'm going to bless 6, but not 7. Why is this important? Because if we are still gathering on the 7th, the question we should all be asking ourselves is, what am I actually picking up? If I am working outside of the habit and the rhythm of God, what am I actually picking up? Could it be that the reason some of us are stressed in this season is because on that day we should have been resting, we picked up more responsibility? Could it be that some of the weight of our life is because we have picked up things on a timeline, on a day where we should have prioritized family, where we should have prioritized our marriage, where we should have prioritized our kids, where we should have prioritized our workout, where we should have prioritized our hobby? Could it be that some of the things happening in our life are because we kept collecting and kept trying to produce outside of the rhythm of God? And here's the simple thing and the simple truth. In God's economy, rest is not a suggestion. It's a commandment. Rest is not a suggestion. It is a commandment. And when we reject God's commands, we remove God's covering. Some of us have been experiencing some things in our life, not because God didn't want to protect us. It's because we moved outside of the covering of God. Dallas Willard says this: hurry is the great enemy of the spiritual life today. Hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life today. And what the enemy can't kill in faith, he will kill in fatigue. Some of us have faith for things, but even the thing you have faith for, you can't enjoy because you're so fatigued. Some of you loved your job. And you say, maybe I don't love it anymore because when I show up, not because your faith has changed or your love has changed, it's because your fatigue is ruining the thing that God has called to be a promise in your life. And what the enemy can't kill in faith, he'll kill in fatigue. And here's what I've come to find. It is only when we slow down our lives that we can catch up to God. It is only when we slow down our lives that we can catch up to God. And so if we are going to live into the habits of God, holy habits that are intended to bring good into our life, to give us access to life and life more abundantly, one of those habits is we have to recover the habit of rest. And I want to share with you 4 things really quick that you can take into your day, take into your week, take into your life to recover rest. Here's number 1. Are you ready for this? The first thing we have to do to recover rest is practice silence and solitude. Oh, man. It's quiet in here today. Can I be honest with y'all? Like, whenever you go preach at your friend's church, like, you want to preach, like, your favorite sermon. Like, you be like, ooh, I want to preach something, like, fuzzy and warm and, like, make everybody laugh. And then God told me to preach on rest. And I was like, I don't want to preach on that. That's not cool. I want to preach something cooler than that. And God was like, no. But I need my sons and daughters to understand that this is actually what's robbing them of joy. And they keep breaking my heart because they keep breaking the right rhythm. We're going to find rest. We first have to find silence and solitude. Silence and solitude. Jesus, in the book of Luke, no less than 9 times, it says goes to a quiet place. Jesus is constantly seeking a quiet place, a place where he can hear from God, a place where he can sit with his own thoughts, a place where he can pull away from the noise, pull away from the crowds, so that he can have enough time with himself and enough time with the Father so that he can understand what he was supposed to do, discern, to grow, to develop. He is pursuing time and time again silence. And if we are going to live like Jesus and have a holy habit of rest, you're going to have to become more comfortable in the silence. You're going to have to become more comfortable in the quiet spaces. Look at Mark chapter 6, verse 31. I want you to see this. Mark chapter 6, verse 31. Then Jesus said, let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place to do what? Rest a while. And he said this because so many people were going and coming, going and going, coming and going, that his apostles and him didn't even have time to eat. Ain't it a crazy thing that you would be so busy taking on commitments, doing this, doing that, going from here, going to there, moving this, moving that? Isn't it so crazy you would do so much of that you wouldn't even have time to eat healthy? I mean, none of us would never do that, but I'm just saying. Isn't it wild to think that we would be praying to God for a miracle in our health because we're like, God, I just don't know what happened. I had to eat McDonald's every day, all week long. And God said, no, you didn't. You just built a schedule with no rest in it, because if you did, you would have been able to meal prep. And then we blame it on the devil. You know, we're good at that as Christians. You know, the devil is busy. I went to the doctor today. The devil ain't had nothing to do with the fact that you said, well, Chick-fil-A is different. You know, I just can eat a Chick-fil-A every day because that's anointed. That convicted some of y'all. I get to see it in your face. You was just like, nah, he gonna come at me like that. Look at Jesus. Jesus said, hey guys, I know we're doing great work. I know it's important, but we're so busy, we don't even have a time to prioritize the practical needs that we have. Look at Matthew 6, verse 6 in the Message translation. Jesus says, here's what I want you to do. That's what Jesus said he wants us to do. Find a quiet, secluded place so that you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and honestly as you can manage. The focus will then shift from you to God. But it only happens in silence and in solitude. And many of us are forfeiting this space because we've been taught to only pursue the noise. I don't know about you, but I know this for a fact. I know one group of people that does not care about our spiritual life, and that's children. Children could care less about my time with God. My daughter Madison is 9. My son Jackson is 8. And if there's anybody who's going to interrupt time with God, it will be them. And there's this new trend on social media. I don't know if you've seen it. People are saying like, I'm this, so of course I do this. And I'm this, so of course, you've been seeing it? You've been seeing it? Watch this. So I'm doing one too. I'm a parent. Of course I sit in the driveway for 15 minutes before I go in my house. I'm a parent. Of course I go into the bathroom, and I may or may not be using it, but I'm going to sit in there for 20 minutes. Do I have a witness today? Like, why am I doing that? Because I need some peace and it's crazy how hard we will work to find quiet from our kids. But do you work equally as hard to find a quiet time with God? You will hide in your closet to get away from noise. When's the last time you've worked hard to say, God, I got to create silence in my life to get closer to you? When's the last time you said, man, I haven't had enough time to sit with my own thoughts to know what I'm really feeling? And could it be that God is inviting you to a rhythm, a habit that allows you to sit with your own thoughts long enough so you can make sound decisions this next season? The first thing you got to do is practice silence and solitude. Here's the second thing you got to do. You have to practice Sabbath. Comes from the Hebrew word, which literally means to stop, to cease, to slow, to stop doing all the things that you do. Now, here's what I've come to find, that if we're going to do this, we need to also understand the problem. And here's what we recognize in our culture today. Most of us rest from work, but we don't work from rest. Like, we rest from all the work we do. We don't work from rest. How do I know? Because you don't take off unless you're sick. You got to be falling apart to actually be okay being at home for a day. And we have created a habit of saying, I'm going to work until I can't work anymore, as opposed to working from a rested place. Working from a recovered place. Now, I don't know about you, but here was my problem with Sabbath for a long time. I just didn't understand Sabbath. I had a couple misconceptions about Sabbath. The first misconception I had about Sabbath was that it had to be a specific day of the week. But what I found to be a healthier rhythm for me is actually a time period that may change from week to week, but it works for my schedule on that week. And this may be liberating for some of you. Like, I used to think it was going to be Saturday for me, but then I found out, like, man, well, if I do Saturday around 4 o'clock, people are going to start texting me about church the next day, and then I got to start looking at my notes, and I'm really not taking a day. So now what I do is on Fridays from noon till Saturday at noon is my Sabbath time. Now, here's the second misconception. I thought Sabbath meant I'm just supposed to sit on the couch all day and rock back and forth and pray. That's what I thought it was. And I'm cut from a different cloth. My dad was a Marine. You know what I'm saying? My grandfather was in law enforcement. Like, my grandfather was a Navy man. So for me, like, laziness just don't work in my family. I'm not going to sitting down all day like. But actually, in the Jewish tradition, Sabbath was not a day to just sit still. Sabbath was a day of recreation. Sabbath was a day of hobbies. Sabbath was a day for family. Sabbath was a day for laughing. Sabbath was a day for getting together with the community. It was a day they danced together. Look, I love this. Dan Allender, in his book, Sabbath, says this about the Sabbath. He says, the Sabbath is an invitation to enter delight. He said, it is intended to be the best day of our lives. Sabbath is the holy time. Here it is, where we feast, play, dance. Okay, which service is this? Last service was the PG-13 service. Is this which service is this? This is the have sex. Hello. There it is. I thought I'd get more amens than that. That's okay. I'm good. Sing, pray, laugh, tell stories, read. Okay, here it is, all the men. The project that you've been telling your wife you was going to do for 3 months. I'm going to get to it. You know a great day to do it? Sabbath. We're going to paint the room together today, baby. We're going to walk around the neighborhood together. We're going to watch creation in its fullest. It is not a day to just sit still, but it is a day to do the things that bring joy to your relationships, joy to your heart, joy to your mind, joy to your life. Maybe what you're looking for is found when you recover rest. You got to practice Sabbath, because Sabbath is God's way of bringing joy back into our lives, strength back into our lives, hope back into our lives, delight back into our We got to practice Sabbath. We got to practice silence and solitude. Here's the third thing if we want to recover rest. Am I helping anybody? We good so far? We good? We good? Okay, here it is. Number 3. We got to practice simplicity. In a world of consumerism, and in a world of doing more, and in a world of comparison, we've got to practice simplicity. And the problem with simplicity is some of us just don't know what it really looks like. So let me just give you a few of my examples. Simplicity looks like contentment. Like I could do more, but I'm grateful for what has already existed. Simplicity looks like margin. It means that I'm going to stop creating meetings. I know it takes 10 minutes to get from Starbucks to Target, so I'm going to give myself 1 minute in between. Come on, some of y'all know your calendar looks like that right now. It looks like margin. Do I have some space in between this thing to the next thing? It looks like boundaries. Saying, hey, I've set aside this time to watch movies with my kids, and anything else I'm going to do needs to work around that commitment. Yeah, I've set aside this time to talk to my spouse. Yeah, I set aside this time for friendships because friendships are actually, I set aside this time for life group and small group because I've recognized that it's going to bring something into my life, accountability and love and being seen and known, and I need it. So my other things got to work around this boundary. And I'm okay with living a simpler life. Simplicity is not laziness, but it's self-leadership. It's saying I'm not allowing the world around me to take me on a journey, but I'm deciding the pace in which I'm going to move at. Let's go to 1 Thessalonians 4 to see this really quick. I love this passage. It says, and make it your ambition. Somebody say ambition. To live a quiet life. And then it says this. This is what the Bible says, not me. To mind your own business. Man. Some of you, this would change your life right here. You'd have a great year if you just stayed in your business. Half your stress ain't even your stuff. You know, I just up all night talking to them on the phone. What was you doing last night, baby? Well, you know so-and-so called. So-and-so always call. And watch this. And it says, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. One translation says, a simple life. Simple doesn't mean lazy. It just means that I have enough self-leadership to be content and to know that I don't need more right now. I'm good. I need to focus on my boundaries. I need to focus on my commitments. Got a question for you. What was Jesus doing at 23? We know he was a carpenter. Okay. What was Jesus doing at 27? Better carpenter? Okay, last one. What about Jesus at 29? Master carpenter? I don't know. It's almost as if Jesus made it his ambition to lead a quiet life for 30 years. It's almost as if Jesus, who could do miracles, signs, and wonders, was okay with seasons where the spotlight wasn't on him, with seasons where he didn't have attention, with seasons where he didn't need more to feel like he was satisfied. He said, I'm content with my life. And for some of us, the reason why the enemy has us outside of the habit of rest is because we're not content with what God has already done. And we're constantly looking at what's next and what's more. And God is saying, but is what I've put in your life already enough for you to live and love a quiet life? And to practice simplicity takes effort to be content and have boundaries. Here's the last thing, though. You got to practice simplicity. You got to practice Sabbath. You got to practice silence and solitude. And if we're going to recover the habit of rest, we have to practice slowing down. You got to slow your life down. I've come to find this, that rest is a form of resistance against a culture and a world that will constantly tell you you're not doing enough. And so what do? We do more, and we still feel unfulfilled. And we do more, we still feel struggling. And we do more, and we still feel strained. And we do more and more. And I just wish some of us would just wake up to the reality that more is not the answer. And could it be that the holiness of God, the sovereignty of God, who said, you need a day, you need a moment to rest. I'll tell you 2 stories and then I'm done. I saw this play out in my own life, and I don't want you to think I'm preaching to you something I heard. I'm preaching not to y'all, I'm preaching to us. When I saw this play out in my life, not too long ago, my daughter was 9 years old, had been having a really hard time at school, connecting and finding friendships and emotionally. And I was on the phone with my wife, and we were trying to make some major decisions for some things we're doing with our church and strategy and some judgment calls. And I'm on the phone with her, and my daughter's just constantly moving back and forth. And I wasn't aware until Holy Spirit convicted me that, Vernon, she's trying to get your attention. She didn't say it with her words, but she said it with her eyes. And I would love to stand up here as a preacher and as a pastor and tell you that I was getting it right. But I kept ignoring her because decisions got to be made. Plans got to be executed. Judgment calls have to get done. And I got responsibilities. And I got things to do. I ain't got time to slow down. And Holy Spirit convicted me and said, Vernon, look at your child. Give her your attention. And immediately I told my wife, I said, hey, I got to get off the phone. Madison needs my attention. And when I slowed down, when I gave myself the margin, my daughter began to reveal to me her heartbreak and her challenges and how she was struggling and how she felt embarrassed today at school and what was happening in her classroom and what they said to her and what she was doing. And I was going to miss it because my life was moving too fast to give attention to the thing that mattered most. And some of you have been looking for the cheat code, that recipe to a better parenting, better marriage, better friendships, better this, better that. And could it be that what has been missing is that your life is too fast for you to actually see the more important thing that is right in front of your eyes? Here's the last thing I believe when we look at this text, we see Jesus had to get on the boat, and Jesus is not rushing to the other side. He's not telling him, hey, get to the other side as fast as possible. He's resting knowing that if I'm on the boat, we'll get there. We may not get there fast. We might not even get there always easy, but we will get to the other side. And as I begin to think about this, I begin thinking about an experience my wife had early in our marriage, first few years of our marriage. We used to have this issue over and over and over again. We'd be showing up somewhere, about to go into a public event, a cookout, a party, a friends gathering, whatever. And we would start walking together. And then eventually, she would be here. And I would be all the way up here. And she would always get frustrated with me. Like, why you got to walk so fast? And I was like, why you can't walk faster? Well, don't try to act like you ain't had none of those conversations in your marriage. And one day she sat me down. She looked me in the eyes. And she said, babe, it's not about how fast we walk. It's about sometimes it just feels like you're more excited to be with them than you are to be with me. You're more excited to get there than who you get there with. And I believe a lot of us in our life are walking with God. And we're frustrated with God because we're like, God, if you could just hurry up. God, if you could just move faster. God, if you could just come with me. God, I got things to do, but you can come with me to my thing. And could it be that we will never catch up to God until we slow down and say, God, I want to walk at your speed. And I want to move at your pace. So if that looks like sitting down for a day, if I meet you there, that's enough. And maybe in slowing down, God will show me where simplicity can show up. Maybe in slowing down, God will show me that, hey, on the Sabbath, I want you and your wife to do that project together because it's going to bring joy to your relationship. Maybe what God is going to show us is that, hey, there's a hobby that you've been neglecting, but that hobby is necessary for you to find the joy of life. Maybe in that place of slowing down, you're going to find out that in the silence, God is not just going to show you, but he's going to show you the people that he wants you to impact. What could happen if we recovered the habit of rest? So I want to challenge you today to recover your rest, to recover the rhythm of God. And here's my simple challenge. I want you to find one day this week. Maybe it's not 24 hours right now. Maybe you're like, Vernon, well, I can do 12, or I can find a period of time. But find a day where you say, this time is set aside for conversations, for family, for parenting, for movie night, for hobby, for golf, for going to the gym, for meal prepping, whatever God is doing in your life. I got a time to live into this holy habit. And maybe, just maybe, the life and life more abundantly we've been waiting for is on the other side of a holy habit called rest.